everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I am Jen. This is Fundy Fridays, and here on my channel I talk about different aspects of Christian fundamentalism, American conservative politics, pop culture, and gay stuff. And speaking of gay stuff, I'm going to address this at the top of the hour. There are rumors and possibly proof that Ruby, Franke, and Jodi Hildebrandt may or may not potentially, possibly, allegedly be sometimes in a physical relationship together.
I certainly got weird vibes from Jodi and Ruby. I don't think it's normal at all that a therapist would move into her client's home. I was moving out to college and I hadn't even left the house yet, and she is in my room and in my bed.
What was that relationship between the two of them?
Ruby tried to be secretive about it, and so I don't know all the details, but just the vibes that I was getting was that something was strange between them.
In the book, Shari writing about messages between the two she says she found on Ruby's laptop after their arrest. That confirmed for me the truth about the nature of her relationship with Jodi and how it had spilled over into the physical. Ruby expressing her frustration about having to cater to Jodi's needs for physical affection without getting anything in return.
Were they romantically involved with each other?
I never saw anything specific about that.
Do you think they were more than friends?
I'm not sure.
That is one aspect of this story that makes it so outlandish, but the point of today's episode is not, haha, they're possibly gay. It's, wow, these women tortured children, and one of them was a therapist who was doing this to a lot more than just one person's family. They were doing it to a lot of people's families. And so that's the main focus of today's episode. It is interesting. In other words, it's okay to think it. I think we're all thinking it, but let's not turn the comment section into just speculation about these child abusers' sexual orientation. This was an insane situation, and children were horribly abused, and a lot of it was fueled by religious delusions and possibly a cult connection with the group Connexions. But all of that, just keep in mind, today's episode is going to be a very heavy topic. We're going to be talking about horrific forms of abuse, and we're going to be talking about stuff that's really hard. And so, content warning, child abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse. Do not look up the police cam footage, the ambulance footage of the kids. Do not look any of that stuff up, because I saw censored versions of it and it scarred me for life. So we're going to be talking about Ruby and Jodi's religion to some extent, because that was a huge part of it, and they were a part of the Church of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons. And so, yeah, today's episode is going to heavily feature Jordan and McKay. I used a lot of their research, I've used a lot of their footage, and I'm going to include an interview with them. Even after all of their research, I still have some burning questions, and I have a lot of things that I think would be better explained with the full context. So the full context being the culture of Utah, the culture of Mormonism, and the culture of mommy vlogging and therapeutic abuse. So I'm like, who else in the entire world is more qualified to talk about that than Jordan and McKay? So heads up, that's what today's episode is about. If you want to head out but you're still curious, these two are behind bars from anywhere from 4 to 30 years. It's complicated. They didn't give the full sentence. It's different in Utah. We're not going to know for a few years even what their full sentence is, but they are no longer harming anybody outside of prison. Notice I said outside. I don't know what they're up to inside. But today's episode, lots and lots of crazy shit, and it's just the perfect intersection of everything we talk about. So let's begin. I have not seen Devil in the Family, which is the Hulu documentary that features several Frankies discussing the situation, and I might watch it someday, but I'm certainly not going to use it for today's episode. There would be no way I could use any of that footage without getting copyright claimed in the first place, so.
She just wanted to show the view of a Mormon happy family.
But they only saw what we wanted to show them.
Sit her down on the flipping couch. Okay, move it. If I hear one more word,
Also, I just found out that in 2024 there was a Lifetime movie about Ruby and Jodi, starring Heather Locklear as Jodi, which is, you know, giving a nice portrayal of what Jodi looks like. And who's the other one? Emily Eulerup. I'm probably saying that wrong, as Ruby. I'm beside myself. I've never heard of this.
Jodi is God's messenger. I believe in Jodi. Jodi says Jodi.
Mormon Mom Gone Wrong. The Ruby Franke story. Premieres Saturday, October 26th.
The family apparently hated this movie, and I don't blame them because it seems extremely unnecessary and inaccurate and exploitative. Let's start from the beginning-ish, I guess. 8 Passengers was the name of the YouTube channel that Ruby and Kevin Franke ran with their 6 kids. So 6 plus 2, 8 passengers. They had a huge van. They had a lot of kids. They were Mormons in good standing with the church. They were always seen kind of braggadociously, like outside of the temples and going to temple events. And in order to be able to even go into the temple and do these specialty events, you have to have your temple recommend, you have to be paying tithing, 10%, and you have to basically follow all the rules. What can you say about the Frankies' old relationship with the church and how maybe they were used as positive propaganda and how they would have had to be in good standing with the church? And what does that mean to be in good standing with the church? What do you have to do? What do you have to do to uphold that?
Particularly unique aspect with the Frankie's relationship with the church is that Kevin was a BYU professor. Those who are working at BYU, especially nowadays, they have tightened the grip on things. But being a church, an employee of the church requires that you are a temple recommend holder, which means that you have to go in and you have to interview with first your bishop, who is the most local leader over your congregation, and then a member of the stake presidency who is over several congregations. There's like the president and his 2 counselors that you could meet with, but they have to determine that you are worthy to enter the temple. You have to basically, you go in, you do an interview, they do questions like, do you believe in God and Jesus Christ? Do you believe that Joseph Smith was the prophet of the Restoration? Do you believe that, or do you sustain the current church leaders as prophets, seers, and revelators? And then asking if you
pay tithing,
also follow the commandments, like making sure that you pay a full tithe of 10% of your income, making sure that you don't have sex before marriage, and that you're completely
wearing your garments,
faithful in your relationship. You're wearing your garments if you've already received that and everything. So you have to maintain a temple recommend in order to do that. And you have to basically go in there, and if you believe all this stuff, easy, you just answer yes to all of it. Obviously, you could lie, but it didn't seem like they were.
But being in good standing wouldn't be optional.
No, it's not
like,
optional.
You don't, like with some of the influencers, you know, where we're like, we don't really know. They could maybe not have a temple recommend and just do whatever the hell they want. Like, who knows? But with Kevin, like, if he wants to maintain his job at BYU, like, all of these things have to happen. So it's interesting on an influencer, like, litmus test, because it's like, you know that they're paying tithing. You know that they're doing all these things. So their commitment to church is a lot. And Ruby was also, in my opinion, very devoted.
Yeah.
Like, very devoted. It showed in content. She's one of the only Mormon influencers really from the beginning that presented Mormonism as a cornerstone of her platform versus just like an accessory that sometimes comes in and out.
We also go to church, and then
and you don't ever hear about it again after that, or it's like implied. But with Ruby, it was always center stage. Like, we're Mormon, we go to church. Here's my kids getting baptized. Here's us going to church on Sunday. Like, it was always a cornerstone of her content, which I think makes it unique. But it also, like, it creates a, like, there's no way the church didn't know about what they were doing and the impact it was having, because they were some of the first family vloggers out there that were super successful that were Mormon. The church is like, damn, your income really started going up because I know how much we're paying Kevin, and your tithing got a whole hell of a lot bigger.
Right.
So there, I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Like, the church is benefiting from everything that they're doing up to a point, right? Like, this is where the PR disaster comes in these kind of scenarios.
I mean, you just look at the last thing they uploaded was the vlog of the youngest's baptism.
Mm.
And they were like sharing video of all that and little clips of people giving talks and stuff at the baptism.
Do you know that the church doesn't, put out a statement, we've declared so and so an apostate, or do they?
They used to.
They don't often now. It's pretty rare.
They used to put it in the paper, like a little shame parade.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, they haven't
Like the
done that.
obituaries section, basically.
Yeah, I would see that would be like a point of pride to like have that framed if you,
Right?
So it's safe to assume they're probably not in good standing now, or have been kicked out, or maybe the church just.
I honestly doubt it.
Yeah. We can't say for sure on Jodi. We haven't heard anything, but we have heard that Ruby had met with local leaders and was intent on maintaining her membership in the church. I don't know.
She's allegedly participating in like morning things in the prison. Like she'd mentioned her bishop in her like at her sentencing hearing. And so if they're remorseful, I don't think Ruby's remorseful. But if they appear remorseful, the church is going to like see that and be like, this is a repentance opportunity, right? Like you can right your wrongs here.
Is there a line?
There is. There's
technically.
We can send you a screenshot. There's a table in the handbook that talks about what's like punishable by disciplinary action, right? So you have things like murder, child abuse, rape, like
child abuse.
Child abuse is in there, but the thing with child abuse is, if I recall right, the table just says that a disciplinary hearing is optional, which means that they don't actually have to discipline you.
Should we fact check it real quick?
Yeah, pull it up. But that way, like the only one that I've seen where it's like automatic disciplinary hearing, like automatic excommunication style hearing, is if you kill somebody, which they didn't do. So that's part of why.
Yeah.
Since they require holding a membership council, murder, rape, sexual assault conviction, child or youth abuse, abuse of a spouse or another, predatory behavior, whether it be violent, sexual, or financial, incest,
plural marriage,
well,
serious sin while holding a prominent church position, most felony convictions.
So this is just a membership council.
Yes, that does not guarantee an excommunication. In a case like Ruby's, where she's working with church authorities, it's possible that she might receive disfellowship, which is different from excommunication. But I mean, when you're in prison, disfellowship isn't really anything because you can't attend your
you can't go to
services
church
anyway.
Yeah.
You can't hold a calling, you can't take the sacrament, you can't do prayers.
Being a member without all the benefits, basically.
Yeah, you can just attend, but you don't
what
lose
fucking benefits
in the end.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I know.
Like, yeah, so I don't even, because having a membership council would require her to like go to her stake, and they'd have to contact her stake leaders, and it would be a whole thing. So if she's in prison, I don't even know that they would be willing to do that. So she ain't gonna get excommunicated for this, in my opinion.
See, I thought the complete opposite. I thought she was totally kicked out. So
yeah, isn't that interesting that they don't care?
Kevin, the now ex-husband, he was a engineering professor at BYU. I also found on r/ex-Mormon a post from somebody who actually was a student of Kevin's at BYU, and they said he was a good teacher and he was really nice. And apparently Kevin said that the channel was called 8 Passengers because Kevin and Ruby and their 6 kids were going to be the 8 passengers in the van of life and the Holy Ghost as our driver. Interesting. When he and Ruby met, they got engaged 2 weeks later and married 3 months after that, immediately started having kids. And to say that their marriage is strained would be a huge understatement. He is, I think, culpable for some of this stuff. I think he could have intervened, called the authorities, raised some alarms a lot sooner than he did. Unfortunately, the kids were in extreme dire state when they were found. And I'm sure he feels horrible about that. And Kevin was abused by Ruby and Jodi. Allegedly, in my opinion. And so it's kind of a complicated situation, but he did the right thing towards the end, and helped the state, build a case against her. Kevin and Ruby are now separated. I'm assuming their divorce is probably going to, not be super fast and easy because they have a lot of legal things and custody and all that stuff to deal with. And, Ruby is incarcerated. And he moved out of her house a long time ago. It was the same time that Jodi moved in. He is currently suing Ruby and Jodi. Ruby's parents are Mormon missionaries and they live abroad doing missionary stuff. Also, several of Ruby's siblings, who all look exactly like her, by the way, they all vlog as well and are pretty successful. In 2015, Kevin and Ruby established the 8 Passengers YouTube channel, and it took off like wildfire. Extremely popular, millions of views. They made lots and lots of money through sponsorships, paid trips.
Thanks again, Wet Ones Hand Wipes, for sponsoring today's video and trip.
And I think a lot of that went to Ruby's head because she was obsessed with being the perfect mother, or at least appearing to be the perfect mother, and everything just became about the vlogs. She even decorated her house so that it would be filming friendly. The kids weren't allowed to put up their own things, and everything had to be put away and neat and clean so that Ruby could vlog. She was kind of annoying, for lack of a better word, before any of the real red flags started raising. She freaked out once because they played Get Low by Flo Rida. The school played the song for the kids and they were going to dance to it and make a TikTok or something. It was really unnecessary and she went off. She was a total Karen and she vlogged it, and it was a whole thing. Stuff like that. Her and Kevin specifically went to Chick-fil-A during a day of support for them because they wanted to support traditional marriage, and she vlogged it.
Okay, this is us waiting in line to eat at Chick-fil-A because we're supporting marriage between man and woman. And here's the end of the line. And we're just going to follow the line. We've got a long wait.
And they just vlogged all kinds of stuff that they really shouldn't have. I mean, I don't believe that children should be promoted on the internet anyway. So it's already a point in the bad category. And they were seemingly obsessed with embarrassing their children or showing intimate moments that should be kept private. Going bra shopping for Shari for the entire public to see, which is so embarrassing, but also I'm pretty sure it's already in your all's mind exactly the type of bad, creepy person who would watch that for less than wholesome reasons. Some other things that people had noted about the vlogs that were troubling would be just Ruby yelling at the children.
I'm only going to say it one more time, and then you're going to lose the privilege to eat dinner.
Or laughing at their misfortune.
If you cut one more thing in my house, I'm going to take the scissors, look at me, and I'm going to cut its head off.
Grandma will be so mad.
She did not take their medical issues seriously.
Mopping the floor. I'm stalling. I think I'm ready now. I think I'm ready to leave. I put on a little bit of lip gloss and that will be as much stalling as I'll go. And so she woke up this morning and she's like, Mom, my vision is really blurry, more blurry than it usually is. Kevin just came in and he's like, I think we need to take Shari to the emergency room. I said, well, let me take a shower and then I'll be out. It's been an hour, so.
Other things that people raised red flags about that Ruby proudly vlogged about would be taking away Christmas from her children.
I'm scared to share this because knowing people these days, I don't know if people are gonna, how they're gonna respond. Well, we have 6 children. The 2 youngest are showing long patterns of selfishness. And we told them that this year they are not going to be visited by Santa. So they will, and we prepped them. We let them know that the Christmas morning, their 4 older siblings will be getting Christmas presents to open, and that they will have the gift of love from their dad and I, because we want them to really have a visceral experience that hits them.
Not letting them eat breakfast.
And my kids are literally starving. I hesitate to say this because it's going to sound like I'm
a mean barbarian, but I told the kids, I said, I'm not even going to let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done.
And probably the biggest red flag was when her 5-year-old daughter forgot her lunch that she had to pack herself, forgot to bring it to kindergarten, and the teacher called Ruby and asked her to bring a lunch, and she refused because she wanted to teach her daughter a lesson, and she bragged about this. And she even said, I hope nobody provides a lunch for her because I really want her to learn this lesson.
Just got a text message, and can I bring a lunch over to the school? This happens quite often when you're raising children, because I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch, and it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch. But I responded and just said, responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry. And hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch.
And then when she started hanging out with Jodi, things just escalated at a very fast pace. Ruby's behavior was getting stranger and stranger, and she posted a video where she used a very strange metaphor about fire to describe what I think sounds like beating her children.
This is what love sounds like. When you see someone hurting, you acknowledge the hurt. If your kid came to you on fire, would you say, I'm so glad you trusted me to tell me you're on fire, but if I put out the fire, that's going to really hurt and you're going to end up with scabs anyway, so I'm just going to love you where you are right now? No, you throw them on the ground and you start rolling them. You get a blanket and you start hitting the flames, and they're going to say, you're hurting me, you're beating me, you're controlling. It's like, no dear, hold still, I'm getting the fire out. That's what a loving parent does. And because nobody will do it, it looks to the world crazy. And because they've never been loved before, it looks like I'm angry. To them, it looks like I'm controlling. It looks like I'm militant. It looks like I'm a monster. It looks like I'm mean. It looks like I'm full of hate. It looks like I'm not accepting it, because they don't know what love looks like or sounds like.
Because the universal trip is when Jodi came onto the scene.
Yeah, because that was the nail in the coffin per Shari's book.
Mm-hmm.
And was it Chad? He did something to get in trouble with Ruby while they were on that trip.
Yeah, they were filming content and he was being a little dweeb. He was being like,
a teenager.
It was probably fine.
Yeah,
right.
It was.
And then
not a big deal.
he was supposed to go back to the hotel, but he chose to ride rides instead.
Yeah, he like went on his own and did his own.
That's
thing.
awesome. I'm glad he got to do that. I imagine him at the Shrek ride.
Yeah, literally. But yeah, that was like
This is swamp.
that was the last straw. They
Right.
called somebody like while they were there, and Jodi was recommended.
Okay, because she was on the LDS Family Services circuit.
The theory on how they got together is, what's the last name of those people? The Hannahs.
The Hannahs.
Just
So the
watch that one.
Hannahs are how they came
Yeah.
together, I'm pretty sure.
Are they still around? Is this an active family vlogging channel?
No, I don't think so.
think they
She
might
came
have shut
out
it
with
down.
some videos about her experience with Jodi and Ruby, and that was the last I've seen her post.
Chad was probably a normal teenager, and they felt that he was like really bad and disobedient, and so they put him in counseling with Jodi, and that
Yeah.
didn't go well. I remember you were talking about in the book. The Frankies seemed to have wanted to get some sort of diagnosis for him to like prove that he was like a bad kid, and that was never going to happen.
Fake being happy. Okay? I don't know if I can right now.
And so allegedly Jodi suggested that they send him to a troubled teen camp.
Yeah, I think in Shari's book, she said that Jodi was part motivator for what gave Ruby the idea to send him there.
And then they made their own troubled teen camp at their house.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like he might have wanted to go because it might have been a break from Ruby. I don't know.
Odd.
Chad today has just entered the Anasazi Foundation Wilderness Therapy Program, where he's going to spend the next 8 to 10 weeks living in the
Anasazi Desert.
the desert mountains of Arizona. And He'll be with counselors and other youth that are trying to figure some things out. So you're probably wondering, what did Chad do? Okay, we're not even going to entertain that stuff, but it's an accumulation of things over years, well before we ever started YouTubing or well before we ever got into social media. And it's reached a point where Chad needs to develop some very basic maturity and skills that he's going to need as an adult. And
This is a chance for like a reset, like a start over, like a do-over, like a fresh beginning.
yeah. So the idea is with wilderness therapy is if you can survive with these peers in the wilderness with nothing more than the clothes on your back and a couple of field supplies, then there's nothing in this world that you can't tackle.
We did give him a choice. The choices were limited. We had like 3 or 4 choices on the table, and we made it clear what our boundaries are as a family, where we're willing to go, and what we would like to see. Our expectations were very clear. And we made it clear if these expectations, these basic, everyday expectations aren't met, if you don't live within this parameter.
Or demonstrate just basic life skills.
Basic life skills, basic stuff that every adult needs to learn, then this is where we're going. You can do this, you can do this, you can do this. These are our options. And it came to this Anasazi camp.
By the way, the camp that they sent Chad to, all troubled teen camps are abusive. That shit cost $14,000. Did he like book it out of there as soon as he was 18?
Before that,
No.
actually.
Well, technically, because when Kevin moved out, he allegedly moved out with Kevin.
Okay, that makes
'Cause
sense.
He needed time to, in the same way as Kevin, he needed time to be himself and grow for himself. So he wasn't supposed to have contact with the family
At
members,
Jody's
just like
direction.
Kevin was.
At least he
lived
had
with
his
some
dad.
friends. Yeah. And then,
Well, I don't even think he had.
well,
his
he lived
dad,
with Kevin, I
really.
think, for a minute, but then he went on his own and lived with some like friend roommates. But like, under 18, living on his own.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
It's really sad because I wonder if, that must have been the catalyst for her thinking that all of her kids were possessed or something, Oh.
100%.
And all of this was documented, like Chad having his bedroom taken away and having to sleep on a beanbag for 3 months, which if you don't think that's bad enough, it gets way worse.
My bedroom was taken away for 7 months, and then you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
You've been sleeping on a beanbag.
I've been sleeping on a beanbag since October, and they gave my room back like 2 weeks ago. Oh, I'll give you the reason why I lost my bedroom. I think so. I think this is the reason. At least this is the reason that's been in my head. It's pretty funny, but now that I look back, it's pretty depressing.
No, we never told our viewers.
That I woke Russell up at 2 in the morning and told him that we're going to Disneyland and he has to pack. And he got up and made his bed all neatly and then packed all his clothes in a suitcase. And then he walked out the door and I'm like, Russell, he's like, what? And he's all happy. Has his sunglasses on.
Do you think it's funny? Because
And then I walk out.
if you think it's funny, then that was 7 months ago. Maybe you need longer without a bedroom.
It was not funny.
Russell got the big bedroom and Chad got the smaller bedroom. And Russell's bigger bedroom also had a bathroom. But what you guys didn't know was Chad didn't get any room. He didn't get anything. He was sleeping on the floor in the family room.
You allegedly to Shari when she was her therapist. How did she manipulate and gaslight her?
Jodi was horrendous. Jodi was like if I were to tell you what a therapist should do in a session with a client, Jodi would be not even the opposite example. Jodi would be like, a professor wouldn't even ever think to talk about this with a person because it's so deranged. So, Jodi would gaslight. Like, she would tell her these things and like essentially exploit these vulnerabilities. Like, Shari would be vulnerable about an issue, vulnerable about something she's struggling with or an aspect of her identity. And then Jodi would grab that, hold on to it, and then she'd weaponize it against her in some way. So it's like, oh, you're not doing this because of this. You're doing this because you're actually a bad person. Oh, you're not doing this because this is a normal experience. This is actually like really inherently sinful. And so she exploited vulnerabilities, just gave whack advice. Like, most therapists aren't going to give you advice. in general. They might give you skills, but they're going to help you come to a conclusion on your own. And so the fact that she's like telling Shari, like, you need to do this or you need to do XYZ, and then just plain insulting. Like, she would
Yeah.
just plain insult her and say things that are deranged and horrible and imply that she's a bad person and like lie about things that happened in a previous session and say that they didn't happen. Like,
I think one of the examples, I can't remember exactly, so this is a bit of a paraphrasing, but one of the examples that she had brought up in the book that Shari wrote was basically like, you shouldn't be confident that you're going to pass the test. You should be telling yourself, I can't pass this test. I'm not that good. I'm not as smart as I think I am. Kind of that line of thinking, which is just going to lead to insecurity. That's not going to, that's why I say she's in there and she's like taking people's trust and she's introducing problems so that inevitably she can introduce the solution and they become dependent on her help. So
Jodi Hildebrandt, she's now lost her license, but she was a full-fledged licensed therapist. She was even recommended and condoned by the LDS Family Services, which is like a social service for Mormons from the Mormon Church. They did have therapists in their database that they would recommend. Obviously, there's a implication that that therapist is going to lean Mormon. And in the case of Jodi Hildebrandt, in 2012, Jodi discussed private patient information with BYU and church leaders and got the man kicked out of school and in trouble at church. The article doesn't say specifically what she had revealed, because that would also be counterintuitive, because then the article would be revealing what the patient information was. But knowing what Jodi does, how she separates families, how she plants seeds of doubt, how she tells everyone that even the most mundane activities that a man does is abuse, like, this is a pattern. She's been doing this for over 10 years. She got in trouble for this. She went on probation, but she got her stuff back. So now it's gone. But that took a whole child torture abuse case for that to happen. Jodi herself has a history of kind of ruining people's lives. Not only do her children not talk to her, and that's a huge, trauma point for Jodi, but it's not like she didn't do anything to earn that. But she had a tendency to break up couples, and she would get really intense, and she would tell the women that their husbands were being abusive by even literally looking at a woman, like in public, in general, or online, that they were abusive. What are some of the ways that Jodi would use her therapeutic training to manipulate people?
where do I begin?
I was like, do we have time?
Where do I begin? I think Jodi's a really good example of, we hear a lot about people weaponizing therapy language. Jodi's a really good example of that, right? So like using these like truth and cognitive distortion, and like cognitive distortion is actually just a very neutral principle that comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. So this isn't even something that she like created herself, but she took this kind of therapeutic strategy, like this therapeutic identifier, this label, and then took it and created something entirely different. And so I think that's part of the danger of Jodi, is especially if you're not, if you don't know what these things are, and Jodi just says this is what it is, and you trust her because there's kind of an implicit understanding that she's a professional, then it's like, okay, well, there's weight behind what she says, because she has a responsibility by her profession to be ethical and to act ethically. And so I think that's another of the big issues that I have with Jodi, is there's like, even when she's operating under coaching, like she's still using that I'm a therapist, I have a master's degree in mental health. Like she's still saying those things, which points people to like, oh, this is a trustworthy person who knows what they're talking about. But then also, and I don't know if she was conscious of doing these things. It's more sinister to me if she wasn't conscious of doing these things. But like the manipulative stuff with Ruby, right? Like we all see it plain as day. She came in and swooped in and pulled Ruby right out from under Kevin. And so all of those strategies that she was using, I can assume that there was a lot going on there. Like labeling Kevin's like doings, Kevin's actions as abuse, labeling them as manipulation, like using therapy language to prove to Ruby like this is bad. And I'm telling you because I'm a therapist, so you should believe me that this is bad. And so it's just a lot of weaponization of therapeutic content without it actually being applied in the way that it's supposed to. And then no respect for like what we would want to watch out for, which is things like dual relationships. Like there should have been no personal relationship with her and Ruby if she was seeing Kevin or if she was seeing Chad.
Mm-hmm.
Like especially if she was seeing Chad, like there's a therapeutic relation with them as like parent and therapist, but like beyond that, like dual relationships are against our ethical code, or at least my ethical code as a social worker. So she's just like, who gives a shit about that? No professional boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Don't care. I'm gonna move into your house. Like there's
right. I'm
Like,
afraid to
it's
hug
so
my
insane.
therapist, and she's, you know, moving in with Ruby.
Exactly. So there's nothing therapeutic about this, but what Jodi does know about therapy content could be used to manipulate people, like preying on people's guilt, preying on population specific issues, like people who are religious are more prone to shame. So if I'm really shameful of you and I really lean heavily into the shame, I can kind of get you to do whatever I want. So, you know, there's a lot happening there, but she's also LDS, and this happens within Mormons too, is like, oh, she's a Mormon therapist. So there's this assumption that she's a good person, she's godly, she's in line with Heavenly Father. Like, and that creates another like implicit understanding that I feel like people just inherently trust Mormon people. Like it's common. And that's another issue, is she has like another level of trust, because like I'm not just a therapist, I'm a Mormon therapist, and I meet with church leaders and they approve of what I do because I'm on their list.
And they recommend me, and then you have this very popular mommy vlogger come in and advocate for how awesome this group is, and it just
Exactly.
You know, I could see why people would join.
Well,
100%.
You can even see like the way that she took over Ruby's Instagram for the 8 passengers, just stuff like that. And I feel like there's no way that she didn't know what she was doing when she was, because it seems like she has a disdain for like therapy as a whole, because even when she was a so-called therapist and working in that capacity, she was trying to integrate these things that she was receiving from God or whatever, which go against a lot of ideas in that whole process. And I mean, you even look at the goofy videos of her pretending that she's fucking demon possessed, and they got people coming over to try and cast this demon out. Like, she absolutely knew how to manipulate these people and prey on their insecurities and their worries. And she was like, people trust therapists, but I know better.
Yep.
So if I can get people under the guise of therapy and my expertise or my education, then I can show them the true way.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how I feel what
like
missionaries are doing nowadays, where there's a big push to say, we're not Mormons, we're Christians, we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because they can connect with people who already maybe have a Christian background and use that to get them in the door, and then be like, well, actually, what you
Just
know
kidding.
is wrong and it's not complete. Let us show you the true way, the restored gospel.
I think Jodi is like severely and persistently mentally ill from my perspective. And so I don't think there's any way that she didn't know what she was doing with Ruby. I think she knew what she wanted to do in terms of using Ruby to her advantage. I think her feelings for Ruby were secondary, and that muddied the waters.
And so she was already problematic, and then she started this group called Connexions. Here is a like trailer for Connexions.
Connection requires someone to live principles of being honest, responsible, and humble.
Okay.
So vulnerability means I'm willing to accept the state of existence in this world.
What does that mean?
Honesty and responsibility and humility, living a life that's connected.
I'm Jodi Hildebrandt, and I will report you. And Connexions, which is the group, it's spelled Connexions. It's a group almost like a 12-step program, but also like kind of counseling, but also parenting classes, and then there's also an online component. She would cross like pseudo-therapeutic techniques, which she would use to likely manipulate and abuse people. Mix that with child abuse and a 12-step program, and that's Connexions.
It's like Jodi's umbrella for like every therapy thing she's not supposed to be doing, like under
Exactly.
one roof. Because yeah, she's touching on a lot of different things, right? Like she's working with like sex issues with couples, she's talking about pornography, she's talking about parenting. Like usually most people kind of niche on like one area of content, but I think the biggest thing is the parenting. Like the Moms of Truth is like the biggest nugget in there. Like the majority of time when you look at the content, it's focused on like, here's how you should be parenting your kids, here's how you discipline.
You need to be fighting 100% of the time. It's not a battle with your child. This is a battle against the evil that's in the world today.
Yes.
And you need to be battling it every minute of the day.
And teaching your children how to battle it. And that's where Connexions can come in and be just a godsend for you. Because we are very skilled at teaching you how to see the evil and call the evil out. A lot of people don't even know how to put words to what's going on. I mean, I talk to moms and they're like, Jodi, this is what went on with my child, and I know it's wrong, but I don't even know how to put language to how wrong it is. And then they'll tell me a scenario and I'll say, well, here's what I'm hearing, and I'll explain it, and they'll say, yes, that's what it is.
It was kind of like a catch-all for like we don't have the manual right now, phone loan. But like the manual that we got was given to somebody because she had a training that she did at Homey.
And Homey is it's like a Utah-based like home loan.
It's like a
real estate
company. Yeah, so it's like basically like an app-driven like mortgage real estate.
Like their whole shtick was like, you don't need a real estate agent because like you can just use
list your home on Homey and
like
then
CarMax, but for homes.
Basically.
So she like was consulting at corporations for like thousands of dollars.
Right.
Like,
and doing little trainings and stuff, probably just as a marketing tactic to be able to get clients and then, you know, create problems in order to
sell a solution.
Create a solution for them.
Eventually, Ruby and Kevin started taking classes through Connexions and even teaching classes through Connexions, and they just got super duper involved.
This is when Ruby and Kevin were starting to participate in the Connexions classes and were like becoming part of promotional materials. But this is just what Jen described, like buzzword crap, insane. Like it sounds like she's talking about something weird. So that's why I included this.
So, you know, Kevin would show up in a distorted way or a controlling way or in drama. And what I learned was I don't need to point that out. I don't need to get Kevin to be responsible for him being in distortion. I only need to be responsible for my response to it. I am responsible for the emotions that I go into, and I need to own that. And so when I like quite literally drew this line in the middle and said, whatever distortion he's in, it could be the reality. And a lot of the times it was the reality that you were in distortion. And
fuck does distortion mean?
I don't have to engage that. In fact, it's not my responsibility at all to engage that. My only responsibility is to own mine and to be honest about myself.
Eventually, Jodi took a liking to Ruby. They had a lot in common, namely their children hated them, and they also hated children. Ruby famously said, you shouldn't coddle babies, and Jodi's always calling children satanic and manipulative, and so they had a lot to talk about.
Nobody wants the truth. Nobody wants the truth because these kids, you know, I told Doug, I woke up, the spirit told me, it's all the devil. I mean, you've seen him. I mean, I've known you, for 5 years? You've watched him come at me, come at me, come at me, come at me. Mm-hmm. And you're exactly right, because he knows I know what he's doing. And he uses these kids. And he uses all of us as the adults, the parents, that don't hold the kids accountable. So now it's abusive to make a kid sleep on the floor. It's abusive. Or it's abusive to, you know, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You can't even raise your kids anymore.
In 2021, as Ruby was being promoted and elevated in the Connexions group, Kevin was being demoted and punished. He had to go to all the different men's groups and talk about how he was addicted to sex and all this stuff, and how he was just like this horrible, horrible person. And she basically put him through a 12-step program with other alleged sex addicts. Eventually it got to the point where Jodi would tell him that God wanted him to be in solitude, meaning he wasn't allowed to talk to Ruby or his kids or his friends or the other men in the group, and she completely controlled his access to Ruby and his kids, which is likely why he moved out and Jodi moved in. And it's very strange, I know.
When Jodi called me one day out of the blue and just said, I don't understand why you're not getting it. You're not changing. I don't get it. So I've been asking God what to do, and God told me that you need just to have complete solitude with God. I don't want you to come to men's group anymore, and I don't want you to do phone calls with any of the men. And I'm like, well, then who am I going to talk with? Who's going to support me? God will. You need to learn to go to God. And so I'm just like, there's nobody. You're just, I mean, I'm going to be completely cut off. And she's like, no, you'll have God.
Okay, so Kevin in some of the police tapes was talking about the sexual aspects of the men's group that he was in. Like something about Ruby being upset that he wanted to have sex or that he wanted her to wear lingerie or something.
But I did. I took the challenge and I sat down, and for 2 hours, Ruby very emotionally just shared how she felt in our marriage and how the things that I, over 20 years of marriage, you know, asking for sex as a husband frequently, or asking her to wear lingerie or things like that, how that made her feel. And it was really emotional, and it touched me. Like, I didn't realize that she felt so strongly about that she felt so hurt by that. And so I committed that I would really give it a go. And I stayed in the men's group. And so, you know, in that men's group, I met with Jodi every week.
And I didn't quite understand the context of what they were talking about. Like, what was being taught in these classes? What did Jodi consider a sexual sin, and how was she trying to help these men?
Yeah. So Shari talks about this in the book, and we kind of suspected this based on what based on what Kevin was saying. But essentially, it's like Jodi coded everything, like any normal male or female behavior, essentially as like lust coded. So like if Kevin's talking to a woman at the gym, like he needs to be punished for that because that's lustful behavior. Like looking at another woman, like in your like eye line of view, I'm staring at, not like I'm like checking you out, but like I see you in my periphery at the gym, to Jodi was sinful. Like it's inherently sinful. It's, you know, it's like a sexual deviancy essentially to be doing these things. And so they had to like self-report all of these things that happened to each other and to Jodi. So like I looked at a woman's butt in the line at the grocery store. I watched porn
Paul.
X amount of time.
I was going to make a Paul joke, but I didn't know how to insert one.
Let me just interject and throw it right out there.
Right? But
Well,
like
it's
that's the idea.
Basically what she was selling is essentially what Mormonism teaches, but even more amped up.
Like
Because
extreme.
like when you're looking at what each gender is receiving in classes throughout all of their upbringing, basically, especially in like those teenage years, boys are constantly being talked to about pornography and saving yourself for marriage, and you know, making sure that you're worthy to hold the priesthood by not, you know, viewing pornography and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, you have women who are basically just sexual objects to be acted upon. Modesty is of the utmost importance because it could make a man sin, and then he wouldn't be worthy for the priesthood and stuff like that. So I think what Jodi was doing was essentially taking that idea that men have urges and they're desirous, and any sort of thing that could be construed as desire or a high sex drive or whatever is not something that they should have at all and should be trained out of them, essentially.
Well, and this is just me theorizing, but I could totally see her making like a case for like women in lingerie being like objectification or lustful, even in like a marriage context, because it's like it's too porny.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that being her
Yeah.
thing there. And I mean, anytime, like the whole thing, like they're all interconnected, right? Like the three of them. And so like she's like Ruby's telling Jodi every time Kevin asks for sex, anytime he's bringing up anything, I'm sure Jodi was informed on all of that. So I could easily see her twisting those things and being like, your relationship isn't good and he's trying to manipulate you into sex, or like it's inherently lustful that he's thinking about sex this often in a day. Like she could just totally manipulate Ruby into like whatever weird sexual thing she had going on, so that anything that Kevin did seemed like inappropriate or deviant, even if it was just like a normal request, like if he's initiating or something, like that's not inherently deviant, but to Jodi it is.
That's so interesting because we're used to seeing like the Paul Olagas type that is putting all the blame on the woman at the gym for dressing a certain way.
Yeah.
And instead Jodi's like, no, actually all men are evil, and like sex with them is bad even within marriage, which is not even what you would have in Mormonism. Like
Right.
it's so far beyond what I would expect, and I gotta think it's because Jodi is such a unique person that it's just wild to see it that way. Like you never hear women don't have sex with your husbands.
Right. Well, it almost makes me wonder if she's trying to like equalize, which you can't, but she's like trying to equalize the playing field with like, here are all the things that men do that are inherently sinful, and here, like it's almost like she was trying to balance.
James actually found this, and I think it's super duper interesting that Jodi's master's dissertation was called The Experiences of LDS Women and How Their Culture Influences Manifestations of Their Sexuality. This presentation is a progress report on the data I have collected so far in my research on the sexuality of Mormon women ages 30 through 50. It contains both quantitative and qualitative analyses, and I will include several findings that have caught me somewhat by surprise. In particular, I have begun to note differences in attitudes towards sexuality in women who are raised LDS yet taken to church by relatives and friends. In contrast to attitudes of those who had a more traditional Mormon upbringing, I have also found striking some remarks made by women about how much of the language used to describe sex and intimacy, especially when they were teenagers, has negatively affected their feelings about their own sexuality. So make what you want of that information. It sounds like it kind of is maybe going to touch on purity culture, and I don't know if you can read this thing, but there's an audio recording of Jodi reading it herself, and no, I did not have time to listen to it, but that sounds very interesting if you're curious about hearing about that sort of thing. Things just kept escalating. So Ruby decided to quit 8 passengers, but not for like good reasons, right? She didn't decide one day, wow, I've really been exploiting my kids and people are being creepy and weird and I should totally stop, putting my minor children's faces online. No. She said, I'm doing this because I'm going to save their souls. Now we know that she was talking about demon possession, and we'll get into that.
You wonder where I've been on my vlogs? You wonder why I left YouTube? It's to save my kids. No amount of money. I'm telling you, I was making millions. And I left it because my kids were being hurt. With entitlement, they were being hurt. With people's advice, and they didn't have a mother up the front saying, I don't care what the world's opinion is. This is the truth, and this is where I stand. And fortunately, I had a chance. I had them in my home long enough to do it, and I'm not going to lose them. They're seeing truth, they're accepting truth, they're loving truth. And so this is my passion, is to invite you to stand in truth and put your opinions to the side for a minute, because your kids are the target of distortion.
Okay, so you know how Jodi had Connexions and then kind of the side group Moms of Truth? There was a point where there was a lot of people who had joined the Facebook group, and you don't necessarily have to be a member of Connexions to join the Facebook group. And Jodi was going online and just screaming about how there wasn't enough positive reviews. And it's very alarming.
We need your help. We have almost 9,000 people on Moms of Truth in almost 4 months. It's unbelievable. When people show up and they're aggressive, wanting to attack, we invite them off. We invite them to see truth. They don't want to see truth. We invite them off. Those people, because they get so mad that they can't control what's going on, they turn right around and go give us a 1-star review. Because we've been trying to make it really easy for you to give us a 5-star review. We've put the link on the bottom of every single post. So all you have to do is click the link and give us a 5-star review. That's as simple as it is. But you guys aren't doing it. I think we've had 5 people from the last time I asked, which was probably a month ago. 5 out of almost 9,000, 5 people. Now, do I care about what Google says about me? I don't care at all. However, people who are coming, they care. So I'm asking you, please, 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 to help your other brothers and sisters know that this is a safe, principled, honest, responsible, and humble platform. Please, will you please take 5 minutes and go give us a 5-star? This is something super simple we're asking you to do, and you're not doing it. It's confusing to me. It's like you guys like what you're getting from us, and we're saying, hey, can you please help? It's like we're going across the plains, pushing a wagon cart, and you like you're going across the plains, but you're in the wagon. It's like, can you get out and please walk a little bit? Can you push a little bit? Like, we're not even asking you to do that. We're just saying, can you please take 5 minutes and hit a button and go give us a 5-star review? Please, please. I don't know how else to say it to you. Please, please. We need your help. If you're going to be part of this Connexions truthful family, you've got to do your part.
And while all this stuff was happening, the troubled teen stuff, the Ruby not giving her 5-year-old child a lunch, and the introduction of Jodi and Connexions, people were talking about it online. Ruby and Jodi did not like that. And you might even know one of the people that Ruby and Jodi not so subtly tried to call out.
We watched a video a minute ago on YouTube, and there were a few people who were being very aggressive. They were being foul-mouthed, and they were very angry, and it was blaming anger. It wasn't truthful anger. It was, you're doing this to me, and you're doing this to other people, and how dare you do that? And it was very clear that they were in this distorted position. And then after they spewed that for like, I don't know, a half hour, I mean, I was feeling sick just listening to them. And then they said, love you guys, just like that. And I was like,
well, the whole video was just like, they looked bored out of their minds. I said, did they roll out of bed and make this video? Because they kind of look like it, and their tone was down. And then at the very end, they perked up and like, well, thanks for watching, subscribe, and we love you. And I'm like, okay, there's manipulation right there. They knew the right words to say. They knew to wake up their faces and get bright. And it was not sincere. You cannot compartmentalize love. You cannot say, I love you, and then turn around and hate you.
What's the context behind that clip? You guys had made a video about Connexions, I guess, and they felt called out.
Yes.
They didn't sue you.
No.
They didn't send a cease and desist or whatever, which around
lame.
that time, probably before that, honestly, a lot of people, apparently they were trying to threaten legal action against a lot of creators around the time that the whole beanbag incident came to light.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We didn't receive anything from them other than just like YouTube style subtweeting.
Yeah. Subtweeting and
here it is.
Yeah, we did a video where we broke down. I don't know which video they were reacting to, if it was the Connexions video or if it was just a reaction of theirs to one of their content. But they were mad. They said that we were like, you could just see the manipulation, and I think Jodi called us evil.
Distorted. It also appeared through Connexions social media stuff and some things that I did end up, perusing the Hulu documentary. It really seemed like Ruby and Jodi were trying to doomsday prep. And we know that's already an established tradition within Mormon culture, but it's like they're talking about they're waiting for something big to happen. Jodi is a representative for God. They're prepping all this stuff. They're moving the kids out to an isolated compound in the desert. Like, major red flags. And then eventually Connexions and her and Jodi's relationship took over Ruby's social media. It replaced 8 Passengers. And little did we know at this time, what was going on behind the scenes was way more fucked up. People close to Ruby and Jodi started talking about Jodi becoming possessed. And there's footage in the Hulu documentary of, Jodi supposedly being possessed. In one of the audio tapes where Kevin is talking to the police about Jodi, he says something that is, yes, quite disturbing, but also really funny.
So, like, one of them, she was walking along the beach with Jesus. Jesus challenged her to go walk on the water, and it was a whole lesson on walking on the water. Another, she would walk with Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, and she had a pet lion in heaven named Charles. And it was like this massive lion, and she got to ride the lion, and who she was, and this pet lion, and all. There was another one where there was a lot of satanic ones, where when she would go into possession mode, she would talk in like different voices. It was really creepy.
They also talk about in Shari's book and in the police tapes that Ruby would also sometimes go into a trance, and she would also, I'm assuming, be possessed. And the worst part of all of this is that it sounds like the fucking church condoned this. The exorcisms. And Kevin was in on it. He said in one of the police tapes that he was the main exorcist of the house. I want to know if you know if the church, or even her local church, her ward, knew about some of the child abuse, because in her journals, and I think Kevin even brings this up, the bishop was involved in some of the exorcisms.
Oh.
Like, he'd come over for several hours a day. And I theorized that at some point they probably stopped coming over, because how could you not be like, there's a kid shackled up over here.
Right.
No,
Well, I don't think they were doing that down in
that was before they went to Ivan's.
Yeah.
I think that was
up
there when
in
Jodi
Top
was
Alley.
living with them. And I remember them saying something along the lines of, like, I think the bishop recommended, I can't remember where I read this, maybe it was the journals, maybe it was Shari's book, but like the bishop stopped coming. He's like done performing the exorcisms, and it's like, I think this is out of our hands. I think she needs like mental health help. And then she was like, you know how therapists are. I can't go to a therapist. Like, her own paranoia around therapists.
This is wild. And it would all be kind of disturbing if it was just the adults, but they started saying that the kids were possessed. And we know about this because Ruby kept a very meticulous and detailed journal of all the abuse that they did to the kids over the summer before they got arrested. The things that they would do to these kids included, hard labor in the sun, because they were out in the desert, 100-degree plus heat, making them carry heavy things, dunking their head in water, like buckets of water, making them sleep outside, making them sleep in bad weather, like hail, making the kids sleep on the deck, making them sleep in the dog wash, which I guess they have like a special room that they wash their dog in. I don't know if they have a dog or not. Probably would have run away by now. Making them do wall sits, all day long and not allowed to leave unless they were going to the bathroom. And even then, sometimes they would have accidents and she would blame that on Satan and she would hit them more. Hardly ever allowed to eat. Starvation was her number one abuse tactic. Of course, she viewed that as fasting to getting close to the Lord, and they looked like it. They looked like they had not eaten in a long time. Restraining them, like tying them up. One of the kids was found alone in the dark, locked up, and restrained in a closet, poking them with cactus needles. And that's not even to mention the psychological abuse, which is also horrible. You know, you can't see that physically. You know, she would shame them, embarrass them before all this happened when she was doing vlogs, and then afterwards telling them that there's Satan inside of them and that like all just horrible stuff. She would say that these kids were manipulative and evil and they had they were slithering snakes. Just the most just unloving, most fucked up shit that you've ever heard. In one extremely disturbing journal entry that she told one of her kids, and that she's going to fight the demon until the day her kid dies. Not even the day that she dies. She says, I'm going to fight you until you die.
60-page-long document, while heavily redacted, gives us a pretty clear picture and idea of what Ruby Franke was thinking. Dozens of entries focus on heavily the fact that she truly believed her kids were possessed or demonic and that they needed to be punished. This is a printed copy of the 60-page journal. In Ruby Franke's own handwriting, it details punishments and abuse for two of her children. In the redacted document, Franke seems to have a hyper-focus on her belief that children, referred to as E and R, are disobedient, manipulative, dishonest, and even possessed, leading her to punish them in various ways. On July 11, 2023, Ruby writes about ordering her son to stand outside in the sun.
R, or I should say his demon, stays in the shade. I push R into the sun. R comes back with a cactus poker. When I poke his back to get in the sun, R doesn't even flinch.
As a defense attorney, that's hard to get past. I mean, those are your client's words.
Sky Lazaro is a defense attorney not associated with this case. She sat down, though, with 2 News and talked about this journal and how it was likely a key reason both cases went through the courts as quickly as they did. A written timeline in the journal notes an apparent plan of going to Arizona and finding land. A later entry reveals more about that.
Jodi and Jay are going on a road trip to look at property in Arizona. Ruby has some cash in the bank. If the property's right, we can move on financing immediately. We decided the escalation of the kids is not manageable here and now.
Beyond depriving the children of food and water and what Ruby refers to as fasting, there are also entries where she writes about chopping her daughter's hair off.
The longer the lies are allowed to be spread, the larger the intervention and physical the intervention needs to be. I cut more off E's head. We doused her with water in the dog wash.
Franke also outlines an incident where she nearly suffocated her son. She writes,
"It may sound like I'm underwater with you, but hear me, I love you." Then I put my hand tightly over his nose and mouth. "I'm coming to you in this water and putting my hands on your nose and mouth. The devil has and says I'm hurting you, abusing you, but what am I really doing? You are putting oxygen on me to help me breathe. Yes, that's right."
August 30th, I believe, 2023, one of the children escapes and actually makes it decently far enough away to get help. Goes to one of the neighbors' houses and tells them what's been going on, and they call the police. That's where the arrest comes in. What's interesting is that a little bit before this, Ruby had wrote in her journals that she believed she was going to be arrested, and she even said on the phone that she had a vision that God was going to take her children away. It's like a part of her cleansing process, you know, because she believed she was being persecuted. And later on, she even compares herself to Joseph Smith. Yeah.
Like, my own family misunderstands me. They misinterpret me. And poor Jodi, they misinterpret her. They misunderstand her. She puts her neck out on the line for people, and then they get mad at her. I mean, it is just horrendous. And you know what? Every Joseph Smith, every wonderful man of God has had to be misunderstood.
She says that I'm assuming the authorities, said that she's suicidal, but that's not true. Then Kevin says that must have been Shari that told them that. Really? Really, Kevin? You're going to throw Shari under the bus?
And then to be told that I'm suicidal, I'm like, no, that's not true.
That was either Shari or one of your siblings.
Well, they're all in cahoots. one means all of them, but yes, you're right.
Kevin also implied that he was gonna maybe press charges on Shari for stealing from him.
Explain to me again why this was not robbery.
Because it's a civil issue. You guys are family. She's been in the house before. You haven't been in the house in a year.
Anyway, I don't take anything he says seriously, and Shari is my hero, and she was advocating for those kids and trying to get them help for years. She was begging the police to do something. When Ruby calls Kevin from jail, she says something like, "You've seen what it takes to cast out demons."
Adults have a really hard time understanding that children can be full of evil and what that takes to fight it. You've seen what it takes to fight evil. It's not the person you're fighting, and it can look like something it's not. And you've been there, you know that. And so I don't know any adults who are going to see the truth. Then it gets even weirder at the end, because Ruby's like contemplating how she got here and why such a good person like her would be in jail. And she says, "I'm a good woman. I don't do naughty things." Satan has taken everything away from me that I love. And I'm a good woman. I don't do naughty things. I'm a really good girl. Their sentencing hearing was February of 2024. It wasn't like a long, drawn-out thing. They kind of got to the point.
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony.
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
That is what Ruby Franke said as she pled guilty to abusing her children. She entered the courtroom, giving her parents and sister a smile. Then she answered the judge's questions about the plea agreement before pleading guilty.
Ms. Franke, is anyone pressuring you to enter into this agreement?
No.
That you understand what you've read and that you agree to all of the terms. Is that all accurate?
Yes.
A 10-page document details what her children went through, claims of both physical and psychological torture. Washington County Attorney Eric Clark.
We are pleased that Mrs. Franke has accepted responsibility for criminal actions and that justice is being served.
The hearing only lasted between 5 to 10 minutes. It was quiet, mainly just media and family were there. Franke's family entered and left court together. They did not comment before or after the hearing.
Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
Then the prosecutor, when he talks about both of them, he basically reads them to filth. He says, "You guys are child torturers, you're horrible people, you are a danger to yourself and others, and what you did to these kids is reprehensible." He also brings up Jodi's statements on the phone about children being evil, and he says, "That's not somebody who feels remorse. That's somebody who thinks children are evil, and she'll probably do it again."
The state respectfully requests that the court sentence Ms. Franke to consecutive prison terms for each of the 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. This sentence was agreed to by Ms. Franke in her plea agreement and is also recommended by adult probation and parole. She committed horrible acts of child abuse. From May to August in 2023, Ms. Franke and her business partner held her 2 children, ages 9 and 11, turning 12, in a concentration camp-like setting. The children were regularly denied food, water, beds to sleep in, and virtually all forms of entertainment. They were isolated from others and were hidden when people came to visit the house where the children and the defendants were staying. The children were forced to do physical tasks like carrying loaded boxes up and down stairs and wall sits or sitting against a wall without a chair or stool for hours at a time. They were also forced to do manual labor outdoors in the extreme summer heat, at times without shoes or socks. They were forced to stand outside on a cement patio in the summer heat for hours and even days at a time. They were beaten, and the 12-year-old was regularly bound hand and foot after he attempted to run away in mid-July. Both children had extensive physical injuries from the abuse that required hospitalization when they were found. The injuries from the binding to the 12-year-old are particularly awful. In addition to physical abuse, the children were emotionally abused to the extent that each believed, to some degree, that they deserved what was being done to them. Had the older of the children not had the courage to run away and ask a neighbor to call the police, heaven only knows how much longer he could have survived in that situation. After being caught, Ms. Franke has shown considerable remorse, as evidenced by agreeing to serve consecutive prison terms and being willing to cooperate with the state against Ms. Hildebrandt. However, given the severity of the abuse she inflicted, consecutive terms are appropriate in this case.
And the way that they were sentenced is not the usual way that people are sentenced. Instead, they get a range of time. So the parole board says you will serve 4 to 30, because that's the max. And the minimum time that they can serve from that is 4 years. So after 4 years, the parole board will decide if they're going to serve even longer. And a bunch of things go into making that decision. Their behavior in jail, what people write into the judge, different things like that.
Well, it's a bit of cold, hard math. The Utah Sentencing Commission has a mathematical system set up in place to determine the exact minimum amount that somebody would have to face for, say, aggravated child abuse. After that, though, it's up to the parole board to decide if they're ready to get out. In this case, neither Ruby Franke nor Jodi Hildebrandt have a criminal history, so the minimum sentence for the first aggravated abuse charge would be 18 months. But criminal defense attorney Jeremy Diaz says they would only have to serve 40% of each of the 3 remaining charges after that.
Where they're running 4 consecutively, the anticipation for the base that they will do is going to be 39.6 months. I think it's just shy of 40 months.
So the minimum amount of time that they will serve will be just shy of 3 years and 4 months. What's the maximum amount? Diaz says it's 30 years, but he doubts that they will serve that long.
The facts associated with this case are so egregious, I think in a lot of people's minds, it obviously merits prison time. Generally speaking, for something like this, a second-degree felony child abuse case, I don't think that you're always looking at this amount of time.
The Utah Board of Pardons and Parole will decide how long Franke and Hildebrandt will serve. What is the board looking for when they release someone from prison? Board Administrative Director Jennifer Yim says their top priority is to make sure there's no risk of harm to the public.
We use validated risk assessment tools and professional clinical evaluators to conduct assessments.
Yim says they'll monitor to see if the inmate can control their behavior. They'll make sure the person has completed all the training programs they were assigned, and they'll make sure all people being released from prison have a plan to re-enter society. Yim says Franke's children will be invited to give their input to the parole board, but they're not required to.
It's always up to the victim or a victim's representative how much and whether they want to participate in the process.
Since Ruby and Jodi's arrest, several of Ruby's family members have spoken out.
Bonnie Holeen, Ruby's sister, who also runs a YouTube family channel, initially published a video saying the arrest of Ruby and Jodi was necessary. Bonnie said Ruby, her husband Kevin, and ultimately Jodi and the Connexions classroom have been destroying our lives offline for the last 3 years.
What my family and I have gone through the last couple of weeks is the worst thing that has ever happened to us.
Ruby's sister, Julie DeRue, who runs DeRue Crew Vlogs on YouTube, also shared a video titled My Side of the Story concerning my sister, Ruby Franke.
Jodi Hildebrandt and her website or therapy style, I don't know what you want to call it, Connexions, was not a great resource, and we all saw it.
Julie affirmed what her other sister Bonnie said. Ruby cut ties with family 3 years ago, around the same time she started working with Jodi and Connexions classroom.
Crap hit the fan and she left the family.
Jodi's family member, Jesse, who uses they, them pronouns, and is also a tattoo artist, which is really fucking cool. They spoke to a lot of different media outlets about Jodi abusing them in the same exact horrible ways that she abuses everyone else. And it's really disturbing.
The things that I experienced while living with Jodi, I experienced being tied. I experienced being duct taped. I experienced being blindfolded. I experienced severe isolation. I experienced severe emotional, spiritual, and psychological abuse. I experienced the being told I shouldn't be around other people, being told that I was dangerous to be around. People were afraid of me to the point where I was afraid of myself. I was physically I was forced to sleep outside in the snow. I was, like I said, isolated for up to 12 hours a day. If someone spoke to me directly, if I wasn't wearing duct tape on my mouth, I had to just stare at them and not respond, because she also had systems of people that would report back to her if I broke any of these rules. And her whole thing, which is deeply, darkly ironic, is that everything stems from shame, and how horrible shame is, and that all of the reason, like all of mental illness, all tics, so like OCDs, addiction, everything stems from shame, which is just horrifying, because she is the greatest perpetuator of shame. She also, and this is like a very deep connection, and why I chose to come forward to the media rather than just staying with the podcast. She accused me of being a sex addict. She accused me of being addicted to masturbation, to the point where I wasn't allowed to, I mentioned this on the podcast, to the point where I wasn't allowed to use tampons. I never was allowed privacy unless I was isolated. So that included the bathroom. I was never allowed to have the door closed, because she was convinced that I was just constantly masturbating. She was convinced that I was addicted to porn. I had never seen porn at that point in my life. I didn't even know that people with my anatomy could masturbate. Like I had no idea any of this stuff, but I just believed her, because everything, like, one, she used religion and God as a mode of control, and a mode to manipulate. And so I just believed all of these things. So her ability to convince you of these neuroticisms and these behaviors is, and I was a teenager. And so a child in that position of being told this over and over and over and over again, which I'm certain he was, stood no chance. She also, because of what the abuse and torturing that was going on, and the belief that she had that I was doing something more. So her rationale to the severity of these punishments and this physical and emotional abuse was, she wanted to make my life, and this is like her quote, like this is what she would tell me all of the time. She wanted to make my life so uncomfortable that it would force the sin out, that it would force me to confess. So things continuously got worse and worse, and progressively more and more intense, as a way to get me to confess, because she believed that if I had confessed everything, if all of my sins were out and in the open, that I would be getting better. And I was declining like very fast, exponentially.
Kevin and Chad have been touring the media circuit, especially since they were in the Hulu documentary.
At what point did it all change?
I think once companies started coming to us offering big money for scripts.
Be excited to tell them where your name came from, even if you have to fake it. Fake being happy. Okay? I don't know if I can right now.
It was a chaotic experience. So lots of yelling, lots of snapping, and lots of timeouts in the corner.
The focus gradually shifted away from just solely on our children to us as a couple.
Do you feel like she brainwashed you?
She took control of something that was very, very important to me. My marriage, my family, and she used those like a carrot on a stick.
Looking back, I treated her as a god, and I trusted her so much.
Kevin says Jodi and Ruby insisted he move out and cut off contact with his family to work on his addiction to selfishness.
How could you have left your family?
The bottom line is that I was choosing to trust a licensed professional mental health counselor and my wife, and they gave some terrible counsel. And I have regrets, and I wish that I hadn't done those things.
What does happiness look like for you guys?
Enjoying time with my siblings, it feels a lot more free.
It's wonderful to be surrounded by my children. There's laughter again. We have a lot of new furry friends.
Our home is a zoo.
It is a zoo, and it's funny because like they chew up all the floorboards and everything, and I'm just thinking if Ruby was here, she'd be furious, but Ruby's not, and I don't care, and I'm happy.
And of course, Shari has written a book. It just came out at the beginning of this year, and she's actively lobbying Utah lawmakers to try to get protections for the children of vloggers. I'm getting emotional.
Shari Franke said that family vlogging ruined her innocence long before her mother committed a crime, and she thinks it won't be long before other child influencers, especially here in Utah, like her, come forward with other emotional and financial issues stemming from family vlogging.
I don't come today as the daughter of a felon, nor as a victim of an abnormally abusive mother. I come today as a victim of family vlogging.
Shari Franke spoke about her family life for the first time since her mother Ruby's arrest. She told lawmakers about the harms she experienced from family vlogging.
As a child, I was fully aware that I was an employee. The business was successful when I was happy or when I shared my hardships with the world.
Her life from 13 to 17 years old was posted online for thousands to watch on her family's 8 Passengers channel.
My friends became scarce because dates were filmed and none of my friends wanted to be on camera.
Franke hopes family vlogging is ultimately banned. She says there's no such thing as an ethical family vlogger. Some of her extended family members continue to post videos of their family's lives online, along with several other content creators in Utah.
I foresee there will be legal crises, with these children realizing that vlogging has brought severe emotional distress, or these kids may realize they don't have an appropriate amount of money to show for their labor.
She's working with Representative Doug Owens.
When they reach adulthood, they may not like the way they're being portrayed. Maybe they need to have some control over taking content down off the internet.
He's working on proposing protections for child actors and influencers. He and Franke spoke about payment for children.
I think we ought to be talking about a percentage.
Franke said she was paid for her contributions to the vlogs, often through bribes.
We'd be rewarded $100 or a shopping trip if we filmed a particularly embarrassing moment or an exciting event.
She said none of that money was worth it.
I'd rather have an empty bank account now and not have my childhood plastered all over the internet.
And she's been giving all kinds of interviews and being a cycle breaker and being a strong woman.
Is there anything that you would say to Ruby if you had the chance?
Probably tell her I'm happy without you. Like, I was scared of her for so long, and I am here without her approval, and I am just fine.
Have you forgiven Ruby?
Forgiveness is something I've had to study a lot and kind of think about what it means. But for me, forgiveness would look like not letting that consume every moment of my life and all of my thoughts. I am just trying to move on with my life and trust that things are going to work out the way they're supposed to.
And by the way, she is engaged, so congratulations to Shari. And yes, she is currently Mormon, but she is progressive, so that's awesome, and I am certainly not going to fault her for clinging to her religion when she's been going through literally hell, so give her some time. What was your favorite part of Shari's book?
I think one of the most important things for me that came out of Shari's book was her sense of humor around Jodi. You know, we laugh to get through the pain over here. So I appreciated that. And how descriptive she was of her khakis. And it just gave such a lovely picture of what she was dealing with at the time in such a humorous way.
As I watched my family and so many others succumb to Jodi's twisted dogma, I couldn't help but wonder, what on earth was the source of that woman's power? Why did this woman in her ugly khaki shorts and long-sleeved shirts have such a hold on people? Was it the promise of absolute truth, her supreme self-confidence that offered some illusion of certainty in a world that seems to be unraveling at the seams? Or was it the way she enabled people's hatred of others and themselves?
But I also appreciate the fact that, she was able to share her experience and her resilience and kind of take back the story to be hers again. Because I think when you have a parent who exploits you your entire childhood in a variety of horrific ways, being able to have that story belong back to you, it's yours again, it's her story, she's making money off it as she should. That's what I think is one of the most essential things to me, is that it became hers again, her story to tell and not everybody's opinion. And, you know, the fact that she's in therapy. And I think that's important for people to see, like, you know, there are shitty ass therapists out there. There are, but like even Shari, who had a horrendous experience with probably one of the worst fucking therapists on the planet, has now a lovely therapist who she credits a lot of her healing to. And I think that's really powerful too.
My favorite part about it is that she wrote a book and it was a New York what is that?
Bestseller.
A
Yeah.
bestseller. And Jodi could have never done that, even at her
Right.
her best. And I think that would probably be the most fucking damaging thing to Jodi's ego. And maybe it's not. She is like living on a different planet in a different dimension.
And she
at all
doesn't need
times.
to like
But-
forgive them or like reconcile with her mom. Like I love the idea because I think in this society we're really big on like forgiveness and, you know, everybody needs to be happy and all of these things. But this idea that like you can be okay and you can be healing without having a relationship with that person. I think that's
Mhm.
also a really powerful take.
Would you have like any advice to give to Shari as like, you know, the no contact mom club?
It's so hard because it's so different for every person and, you know, everybody treats it differently. But being in therapy and having really solid boundaries, like knowing, like there's mom wounds are really unique. Like mom wounds, parent wounds in general are really hard to deal with. So having this idea that it's going to be normal to miss that person sometimes, and it's not even the person that you miss, it's like who that role could be. Like I don't miss my mom. I would want a supportive mom. I would want somebody who like actually cares and, you know, like that's normal. And I think people feel like when that happens, sometimes it's like, oh, like I need to reach out. I need to like have a relationship with this person again because I'm missing them. And it's like, no, this is a wound. There's a lot of grief involved in this. And I think grief transforms through time. And so making sure you have really strong boundaries, making sure you have support and someone to kind of go over this with you and figure out which direction that you want to go, but kind of normalizing there's a lot of grief involved in that. And sometimes it might feel like it's not the right decision because you feel like you miss that person, but knowing that it's like you miss the person that they could be, right? Like there's a relationship with the potential, not who the person actually is, if that makes sense.
I like that. What do you say to like this movement of parents online that are, you know, so upset about their kids being no contact and they call them ungrateful and they just like take it so personally? Like I feel like she's gonna have to ignore that kind of stuff or have like a really good support network when those comments start rolling in, because a lot of people just can't fathom the idea of being no contact with a family member.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's part of the reason why I talk about it, and it's part of the reason that sometimes I reconsider it because we get so many like random here and there comments of like, how could you just cut off somebody like that? Like, that's your mom. How dare you do that? You know, like I hear things like that all the time, but you know, the parents wouldn't be in this situation, generally speaking, if there was an ounce of accountability taken anywhere.
Mhm.
Like Shari talks about how in all of the letters that like in the few letters that Ruby ended up writing her, it was all about Ruby. It was all
Mm.
about Ruby and like her as a baby and like, you know, even after all of this, there's still not even, and this is common, and she thinks that Ruby has narcissistic personality disorder. This would be really common. They really struggle with accountability. There's like a moral injury there. And so, yeah, she's going to have a support system because people aren't going to understand. If you're not in the like deadbeat mom, no contact mom club, it's hard to explain, right? Like it's
Mhm.
hard to explain. What people need to understand is like, generally speaking, in these scenarios, like there's heinous things that have happened, and most people in these instances, like working with people who struggle with relationships with parents, like most people want that relationship and they've tried desperately to make
Yeah.
it work in like a million different ways. But if you have somebody who refuses to take accountability, won't like accept boundaries, constantly violates what you tell them not to do or what you ask them not to do, like you get backed up into a corner at some point. You're kind of limited in what your options are. So I hope she has a strong community around her in that, because and I guess just knowing that some people are never going to understand. Like people are not
Mhm.
going to understand it unless they've experienced it themselves.
Well, I think that's great advice. Thank you for speaking on that. There is a lot more to this story. Clearly, this has been one of my shorter videos for some reason, but um, I just wanted to say that there is a lot more out there in regards to Ruby and Jodi. There are countless YouTube creators and podcasters and documentarians and journalists who have covered this topic, and you should go check them all out because there, like I said, there is so much more to this story. I mean, especially Jordan and McKay. I watched over probably 20 hours of their videos discussing every single aspect of this case and the 8 passengers situation, and I can't recommend them enough. They covered more of the journals, more of the phone calls. They covered Shari's entire book. I'm pretty sure they're going to talk about the lawsuits eventually, so just saying, this is only the tip of the iceberg, so please go check out any other creators that talk about it because they all have something important to add to the story. Wow. That was a lot. Shout out Jordan and McKay. Major thank you to them for letting me use their research and use their videos and just be wonderful friends to us. Highly recommend their channel. Please, please, please go watch it, especially if you've enjoyed today's video, because there's a lot more of it over on their side. They recently renamed the channel Viral Virtue with Jordan and McKay, but you can probably find them by typing in any combination of those words. They're on social media too. Love them to death. Best thing ever about joining YouTube was getting to meet these two and having them in our lives, and I really appreciate them. If you want to support our channel, you can consensually smash that like and subscribe button, leave a comment, share, all that good stuff. We have social media you can follow us on, and we have Patreon and YouTube memberships. They do the exact same thing. Patreon, it's easier for me to share the Patreon link because it's short. It's like patreon.com/funnyfridays, but like the YouTube link, it's like number. So just whatever's easier for you to find. If you're watching this on YouTube, it might be easier to click join. I don't know, but it's only $1, up to $3 you can pay, but they do the exact same thing. It's up to you. That money pays our bills. It's basically how we support ourselves. They do the exact same thing. Just depends on which platform you like. YouTube, it's fully integrated within YouTube. You get a special color of your name in the chat. You can do emojis, but Patreon does the same thing. It's just a different website. You get Discord access, and we do watch parties every Monday. Right now, we're watching Righteous Gemstones, a merch discount with free shipping, and there is a playlist of unlisted videos. Got all kinds of funny stuff, bloopers, little comedy bits. It's just a great time, and I love it. We also have merch, and I am working on some awesome stuff for June. So if you don't see anything you like, just hold out. You might like the stuff we have coming up, but we have all kinds of cool things. Fungi Fridays by Max Holler, Overweight Sexually Broken Loser from Lauren Marvell. They also made the Tarot shirt, which is wildly popular, as well as Bite, which is based off a picture of my real cat. He's a little vampire. He loves to bite. My best friend IRL, Gweepers, who is a tattoo artist, and so their art has a very distinctive style, but they made my pronouns are child of God, and they're working on some stuff for next month, and I've seen a preview of it, and you guys are going to lose it. It is so amazing what they're working on. I can't even wait to show you. But then we also have posters, and I did turn them into stickers because somebody asked, from Dreaming of Johnny. And we have Lesbian Socialist Republic, Deconstruction Danger, and the newest one, Attack of the Jezebel Spirit. And I mean, I have all three, and they're awesome. You can get them in multi-sizes too. You don't have to get the gigantic one. You can get the smaller one. Yeah, our merch is so fucking cool. And then, of course, there's like ones that I made in clip art that is not as exciting. But either way, if you want to support us financially in any way, like, that's fucking amazing. I could never ask for more than that. The Genonites are just such a wonderful form of support, and I just can't thank you enough for your kindness over the years and your help with things and your friendship and fellowship and community. And I just fucking love you guys. But I'm always working on stuff. I'm working on a Phyllis Schlafly thing. I'm working on a Duggar thing. I'm always working on a Duggar thing. This might as well be the fucking Duggar channel. But anyway, I love you guys. Thank you for everything all these years. Thank you for watching this video. Love you guys. Thank you for everything. I hope you're having a good summer. I know it's hard despite the world we live in, but just do your best. Rest. That's productive too. Be gay. Do nonviolent crime, and do your best. Just do your best, man. That's all you can do. And be yourself. I love you guys. Grid bless, and I will talk to you later. Bye.